Every day, doctors deal with an insane amount of information, buried under endless pages, menus, and pop-ups. We're finding anything can be nearly impossible. And it's leading to something troubling. Burnout.
Burnout among doctors could cause a shortage of physicians by 2034.
1 in 5 nurses say they are burned out.
44% were burned out.
That feeling of fatigue, detachment, pessimism, and inattention that signals we're overworked, tired, underpaid, or underappreciated. But what if the burnout wasn't because of any of those things, but it was because of the software that you're using? Software that is so poorly designed that it actively makes your job harder, more inefficient, and makes you worse at it. That's what doctors are dealing with. And I think UI design can help. In 2022, the US Surgeon General released a report titled Addressing Health Worker Burnout. The report outlines 7 priority areas of action to build a thriving healthcare workforce in the wake of the COVID pandemic. Out of all of these 7, there is one that I am very interested in talking about, and that is the use of effective technology. The mandate for healthcare technology makers is to work with health workers to design and improve electronic health records, or EHRs, to be easily accessible, understood, efficient, and to not add to the cognitive load to compete with the time health workers spend with patients. In other words, EHRs need to be better at helping doctors do their jobs. In the last 5 years of talking to doctors, many of them say that making an EHR better comes down to the information overload of using the system. There is just so much information on these screens that doctors need to see and understand. And unfortunately, in order to make EHRs as accessible to as many people as possible, EHR makers have defaulted to putting all of the information on the screen nearly at the same time in an effort to help everyone do their jobs better. I believe that there are 3 UX laws that we can look at that can help us understand this problem in a deeper way so that we can more intelligently use design to solve it. Fitts law basically says that the distance between different actions and/or areas of interaction increases the cognitive load of performing those actions. Sometimes within an EHR, there are huge differences between these actions. And more importantly, they might not just be difference on the screen, but in different areas, completely different areas of the product in general. The second law, analysis paralysis, also known as Hick's law, basically just says that there is so much information on the screen, it is hard to know what is the most important. And so because of that, users can become paralyzed with indecision. The law of similarity states that anything that is similar looking will be automatically grouped by the user cognitively. And so things may not look similar in an EHR, even though they work together, which impedes users' access to important functions and information. There have been a lot of solutions proposed to this problem, from different redesigns to different ways to structure the product, and I think there's a lot of merits to all of them, but they miss some of the core fundamentals of the problems within an EHR, and that is just the fact that there are so many different disparate user types that need different information at different times, sometimes unpredictably, that it can be hard to design one single screen or one single dashboard view in order to help them all at the same time. My solution is an itemized experience. Instead of everything being its own page or its own area, everything is an item that has sub-items. Think about it this way. A doctor can have many patients. So a patient might have a problem list and a medication list and an allergy list. And each one of those lists has a medication or an allergy or a problem, the item within the list. Within those items, then, we can present a consistent layout and actions to the user, and they can access those items wherever they need them. Now, this is great, but the UI is still a critical piece of this, because just because we have a new thinking about this UI does not necessarily mean that the experience itself is going to be more understandable, because we can still run into the problems that we discussed earlier with the different laws. Now, within the UI design, I've been thinking about 3 primary areas of focus. This is things like the font and the color, using space, and the UI elements themselves. In terms of the font and color, which are essentially the most foundational elements that you'll find in a UI, I've been using Enter, which is legible at small and big sizes, and it has a wide variety of weights, so you can use it in a nearly endless level of configuration in order to display the right hierarchy at the right time. This, when combined with the 12 color families and 150 color variants, creates a nearly limitless level of customization for the different areas of the product. This can be for everything from buttons to badges to tables to cards to navigation to everything you might need to think of, including things like the system state. The second thing that's really important about this UI execution, and I think primarily even addresses a lot of the UX concerns that we talked about earlier, is the use of space. The open space in this UI isn't just about adding white space. It's about adding focus and how a user perceives the space that they're in. Background blurs and shadows can help create depth. And so we're not just talking about horizontal kind of X, Y, flat plane space, we're talking about a level of vertical depth to lift things off the pages. And the final thing is to be thinking about how these things all come together into the UI elements themselves. This is things like the buttons being grouped together consistently in footers and in toolbars and navigation bars. Also, navigation that gets out of the way. Depending on where you are, the sidebar might be accessible, or it might kind of fade into the background so that it's not a distraction to what you're doing and what you're focusing on. Additionally, some things like a top nav bar to kind of step through different parts of the process might actually just not even need to be there, or might need to change completely depending on where you are. So we're minimizing the number of items on the page at once to direct the focus. Menus and toolbars are consistently placed and sized at the bottom of the page or the top of the page, and they're sticky and or floating so that a user doesn't have to worry about where their actions go, or if they disappear, or if they reappear, any of that kind of stuff. And the last thing, and probably the most comprehensive piece of this UI, are the cards or the modules themselves. And these cards are designed in such a way to be consistent and be customizable depending on the data they need to display. Because this UI and this experience in general is an itemized experience, these cards become a really pivotal part of making sure users understand what they're looking at, where they are, and what they can do with the information that's been presented to them. Many people mistakenly think that UX and UI are different disciplines or different things to put different levels of focus on. But the key here, I think, is to see the interface as a function of the experience. They are not different, they are parts of the whole. Taking into account important UX principles helps me think about how I can solve these problems more intelligently with solid UI design. When I'm talking to doctors, it's always amazing to see how easily they can pick up and understand these elements and the experience, even if it is fairly new and fairly different from what they're used to, simply because of some of the similar UI elements page to page that create and intuitively help them understand the different states or the different purposes of things on the page. And because we're minimizing the number of things, we give them control and a sense of agency to do their best work in this software, which I hope leads to better outcomes and less burnout in doctors in the future.